Who is Durza? What is he like? What is he? Where did he come from, and what are his motivations and goals? Today, we answer all these questions and more as we explore yet another facet of the inheritance cycle by Christopher Paolini. Hello everyone, this is SaberX, and in this video we will be covering the characters, creatures, and plots of books and films such as the Primitive War franchise, the inheritance cycle, and so much more. So, without further ado, welcome, one and all. To start off, Durza is what is known as a shade. Shades are terrible magical creatures, created when a magician, specifically a sorcerer, is overwhelmed and possessed by spirits that they summon and try to control. If the spirits prove too strong for the sorcerers to control, they take over the person's body and become trapped within it, causing them to permanently turn into a shade. So far as is known, only 2 shades are recorded within the inheritance cycle. These are Durza himself and, later, Varog, who comes into being in the 3rd book of the series, Brazinger. Shades are extremely powerful, and it seems as though the number of spirits within them may increase their power exponentially. Whatever the case, the appearance of both shades that are currently known from the inheritance cycle is as follows. They are tall and thin, have blood-red hair, maroon eyes, and sharp pointed teeth that look almost as though they have been filed into the shape of fangs. They also have pale skin and are extremely physically strong. They also only have one weakness. They can only be killed if they are pierced through the heart with a sword or an arrow. Given their magic, any other wounds that might be fatal to a human, elf, dwarf, dragon, or urgle are not fatal to a shade. Any blow other than a fatal strike to the heart will only cause them to dissipate and then reform elsewhere. Likewise, because of their great strength, shades were considered to be extremely dangerous, even to dragon riders. Indeed, throughout the history of the dragon riders during their time in the land of Allegasia, only 2 people had ever killed a shade and lived to tell the tale by the time of the beginning of the inheritance cycle: Latri the elf and Ernstad the rider. It was not well known that shades presented such a threat even to dragon riders, because it was well hidden by the Dragon Rider Order to ensure that the common people did not become alarmed, or find a way to attempt to challenge their authority through dangerous experimentation. As for Durza himself, he did not start life as a shade, but as a human, a boy named Karsabe. Karsabe lived in the area around the Haderach Desert, and he was part of a nomadic tribe. However, he and his family were banished after his father was accused of breaking an oath. Whatever the case, Karsabe eventually saw his parents murdered by bandits. Wishing he were dead as a result of losing his parents, Karsabe wandered into the desert, where he was found by a sorcerer named Haig. Sensing the magical potential in the boy, Haig trained him in the art of controlling spirits. He also gave the boy the nickname of Desert Rat. The 2 apparently may have had a good relationship, but the older man seemingly was reluctant to teach him magic, perhaps due to the boy's inexperience. Nevertheless, when Haig became ill, Karsabe was glad to see him recover. However, their relationship would not last. Haig was also killed by bandits, echoing the trauma that Karsabe had experienced in losing his parents. Out of a desire for revenge over the death of his friend, Karsabe tried summoning spirits to kill the bandits, but was possessed by them when they proved too strong to control. As a result, Karsabe was transformed forever into Durza. It is never implied how long Durza existed for, but it is clear that he was alive for more than 100 years. Like all shades, he was immortal. Interestingly, something also happened to Durza that made him more unusual than any other shade. Drawn to the far north of Alagasia, deep within the mountain range known as the Spine, on the northernmost edge of the Bay of Fundor, Durza had been drawn by dreams to the hidden village of Nalgorgoth, where he spent years with the cult known as the Duel Dromar, the Old Dreamers. There, he also met their leader, the half-elf, Bashel. As a result of this, Durza's mind and ambitions grew beyond the normal scope of a shade. As a result, he was more cunning, had greater clarity, and greater control over his abilities. It may have also been this that helped the spirits within his body speak and act as one entity. Despite his affinity with the cult, Durza never pledged loyalty to them, nor to their deity, Azlagor the Devourer. Eventually, Durza would meet and tutor Galbatorix, a young dragon rider who had recently lost his dragon and had gone mad, in part due to the Dromar's manipulations. The Shade further aided in this and taught him forbidden magic that never should have been revealed. Eventually, he pledged loyalty to the Mad Rider, but this loyalty was always tenuous. In all his years, Galbatorix would never be able to guess the Shade's true name, which would have forced him to swear fealty to him in the ancient language of magic permanently. Among other things, Durza taught Galbatorix the necessary spells that he needed in order to bind the young black dragon that he had stolen to his will. This dragon, Shrukin, would remain forever enslaved from that day forward as Galbatorix began his genocide against the Dragon Riders. It is also likely that Durza taught Galbatorix the spells he needed in order to enslave the Eldunari, the gem-like hearts of dragons that contained their souls, so that even after Galbatorix killed their bodies, he would have access to the energy within these hearts of hearts. However, it is never stated directly as to whether Durza himself actually knew of the Eldunari. Whatever the case, Durza was instrumental in the destruction of the Dragon Riders, which was carried out by Galbatorix and his minions, the 13 Forsworn and their dragons. This led to the Mad Dragon Rider becoming the king of Alagasia after deposing of his rivals, and nearly driving the dragons to extinction. For the next 100 years of the king's rule, Durza served the king even as the Forsworn died off or were killed, but he always tried to find ways to circumvent or overthrow the king in secret, as the Shade was extremely ambitious and did not like being controlled, even as he outwardly professed loyalty to the king. At one point, perhaps some 60 years before the events of the inheritance cycle, Durza was traveling along the shores of Izenstar Lake near the city of Gilead when he came across 3 boys who had cruelly decided to let the fish they had caught die on shore, seeing which one of them would expire last. These boys, Hagen, Shark Troutnose, and Nulf the Short, immediately knew what they had done was wrong the moment Durza caught them, but the Shade did not stop them. Instead, with an evil smile on his face, Durza made the boys stay and watch the fish struggle and die on the shores of the lake until only one remained, a sturgeon. Picking the fish up, Durza cast several spells of unknown nature upon it, saying that the fish had earned its freedom by surviving the longest. Once he released it back into the lake, the Shade turned to the boys and told them that they were extremely naughty children, likewise saying that the fish would be their curse and punishment. He then disappeared into the bushes from whence he came. The sturgeon, meanwhile, would go on to grow to tremendous size, and terrorized everything and everyone in and along the edge of the lake. The fish, named Muckmaw, was practically impervious to any and all weapons used against it. His sharp scales shredded nets and deflected harpoons, and it grew to such monstrous size that no one had any hope of killing it. Many a person and werecat would fall victim to the fish's appetite. Thus, Durza had brought terror to the lake and its community. Little else is known of what Durza did during this time, but it should be noted that he faced off against the escaping slave Ajahad, later an elected leader of the resistance against the king, known as the Varden. During this encounter, Ajahad very nearly killed the Shade, nearly piercing his heart, leaving a thin scratch down the flat of the Shade's sword during his escape. This made Ajahad one of the very few people who not only faced a Shade and lived to tell the tale about it, but one of the very few who almost succeeded in killing Durza outright. Eventually, when Ajahad arranged for the theft of the last 3 known dragon eggs in existence from Galbatorix's treasury, so that the Varden could restore the dragon riders and create a renewed resistance against the king, Durza would be promoted to becoming Galbatorix's second-in-command, which was the result of the death of the last member of the Forsworn, Morzan. The other Forsworn had died off alongside their dragons throughout the century, either killed by the Varden or through overuse of their magic and suicide due to the suffering they had endured due to the consequences of their actions. Their dragons had been stripped of all ability to use language at all, simply being rendered dumb animals, and without any ability to communicate with their dragons, many of the Forsworn went mad. Durza also began magically ensnaring the minds of many tribes of Urgals, keeping them under control with his spells. This was part of a larger plot by the king. The Urgals had slain his first dragon, Yarnunvosk, so Galbatorix used Durza to enslave them and terrorize his subjects, using the incidents to blame the Varden for their attacks until he had a chance to wipe the Urgals out. The Urgals committed many atrocious acts under Durza and Galbatorix as part of this plot. For the next 20 years, Durza would help the king search for the stolen dragon egg until he eventually discovered it and its courier, Arya Dratningu, the daughter of the elven queen Islanzadi, as well as her location, where he set an ambush with the help of his Urgal guards. During this encounter, Durza killed the elven princess's guards, Fowlin and Glenwing. In particular, Fowlin's death hit Arya particularly hard, as they had been in a romantic relationship. His mission to capture Arya was successful, but Arya herself managed to teleport the dragon egg away, leaving the Shade furious. Knowing just how powerful his master was, it is likely that he knew he would be punished severely for allowing the dragon egg to escape his grasp once again. Despite the setback, Durza was able to take Arya prisoner and continually tortured her, including poisoning her with a deadly toxin known as the Skilna Brach. He would also give her the antidote a few hours later to ensure she would not die. He inflicted many grievous wounds upon her, causing her to nearly go mad. However, Arya did not break. Her will was far too strong, despite her losses at his hands. Eventually, Durza learned of the young dragon rider Aragon by way of the Urgals that had escaped him and his dragon Saphira when they attempted to capture them and failed. Eventually, the Shade hatched a plan to lay an ambush. When the young dragon rider and his dragon came to Gilead, his base of operations, in search of an informant that would direct them to the Varden, Durza captured Aragon, though Saphira got away, along with their traveling companion, Murtag, Morzan's own son. Aragon was kept imprisoned in the city barracks and drugged with Vorgathan, a chemical cocktail tasting like brandy designed to inhibit the use of magic. The Shade interrogated the young rider, desiring to control him so that he might have a means of leverage or perhaps to rise in opposition to Galbatorix. However, Aragon refused to play the Shade's game and lied when Durza asked him for his true name, calling himself Dusundavor Frior, meaning Death of the Shadows, as a means of both mocking and trying to instill fear in the Shade. Suffice to say, Durza was not impressed, but did not reveal this. Later, Aragon would escape, having starved himself purposely to make the effects of the Vorgathan wear off. He managed, despite his weakness from being imprisoned, to overcome the guards. He likewise was able to free Arya and carry her out of her cell with Murtag's help when the former and Saphira came to rescue him. Soon, however, they found themselves confronted by Durza himself. The Shade dueled with Aragon, and would have defeated him had it not been for the intervention of Saphira crashing through the roof of the barracks. Murtag used the distraction to hit the Shade first in the shoulder and then in the head with arrows, the second shot causing him to dematerialize and reform elsewhere, stronger than ever. Aragon, Saphira, and their companions all escaped, eventually making their way to the Varden, well outside the reach of Galbatorix's empire. Arya was healed of Durza's poison, saving her life, and this indebted her to Aragon and Saphira. Durza would later gather his army of Urgals to the abandoned dwarf city of Orthiad, renamed as Ithrozada, rallying his forces for an attack upon the Varden, as Galbatorix had discovered where they were, via his spies, the dwarf city of Trondheim in the mountain known as Farthendur. The Urgals were able to discover tunnels that led to the city, but their presence had become known when a dwarf living within the tunnels discovered them and managed to escape. The Urgals eventually arrived at Farthendur, and a great battle took place within the mountain, under the dark hours of night. Durza would enter the city himself, clad in black armor, to capture Aragon and Saphira to bring them both to the king. Using the help of his spies within the Varden, Durza lured Aragon to his location beneath the city's dragonhold, under the jewel known as Isidar Mithrim, the Star Rose. There, the Shade dueled the rider once again, with Aragon using magic to temporarily overcome the Shade and learn his tragic backstory. However, Durza still proved too strong and slashed Aragon across the back, slicing through his armor. Durza would have likely killed Aragon had Arya and Saphira not shattered the Star Rose, distracting the Shade long enough for Aragon to pierce him through the heart. As a result, Durza died, his skin splitting apart as the three spirits within him scattered to the winds. His spells upon the Urgals were undone, and the Urgal army destroyed itself due to their awakening from their deception. However, Durza's ghost haunted Aragon as he fell unconscious. For the next 3 days, what remained of the Shade continued to attack the wounded dragon rider mentally until the last vestiges of it were vanquished by the mental abilities of the elder dragon rider Oromis, referring to himself as Togira Ikonoka, the cripple who is whole, and Estato Shetowa, the morning sage. With the Shade's remaining essence vanquished, Oromis told Aragon to come to the elven city of Elismira, where he would teach him. And thus, Durza was truly forever gone. However, Durza left behind a terrible legacy. The scar he had given Aragon would randomly attack him with blinding pain that would often incapacitate him. For a time, everyone around him believed that the scar would render him permanently crippled. However, this scar would be healed during the Agadi blood run, the Blood Oath celebration, in which the magic of the dragons transformed Eragon forever. However, Eragon would later use Durza and his influence for the basis of a poem he had also presented at the Blood Oath celebration, titled In a Kingdom by the Sea. In this poem, Durza was referred to as the Land of Shadows, and the foe he faces within the land of Durza is in fact death itself. The poem is largely allegory, but ultimately describes how the character of his poem defeats this foe, but spares his life, and eventually the foe returns and takes the character to dwell in the land of shadows in peace when the protagonist grows old and weak. The poem genuinely inspires the admiration of the elves gathered at the celebration, who are impressed by Eragon's ability to use the ancient language in such a manner, for it is extremely hard, if not impossible, to write fiction in the ancient language. Later, when they encountered a group of spirits, Eragon and Arya were given a gift by the passing spirits as thanks for freeing the three that had been trapped within the shade. This gift was to turn the lily that Eragon had grown with magic into a piece of living metal that would one day grow in number and spread. Durza's other creation, the sturgeon Muckmaw, would continue to terrorize Isenstar Lake until roughly a year after the defeat and death of Galbatorix. It would ultimately be Murtagh, by this time revealed to be Eragon's half-brother, and his dragon Thorn, who would kill the giant fish. Using the last remaining scale of Ormus's dragon, Glader, Murtagh was able to lure the fish out and try to catch and kill him. To their horror, they found the fish was extremely intelligent, and that the magic that allowed him to grow to such great size and made his armor nearly impenetrable could regenerate as soon as it was stripped away by the Name of Names, which was itself the very name of the ancient language, meaning that they had to find a roundabout method of dispatching the fish. Murtagh ultimately succeeded when he used a piece of human leg bone buried at the bottom of the sturgeon's lair as a dagger to stab the fish in the head as it tried to eat him, as it was the only thing that could penetrate Muckmaw's enchanted scales. With Muckmaw dead, Durza's hold on the region around Gilead was finally broken for good. However, it did make Murtagh and Thorn wonder if other such monsters that Durza created could be lurking elsewhere within Allegasia. They would also learn of Durza's involvement with the Dromar when they investigated further into the cult's influence and doings. So, what does all of this say about Durza? Well, among other things, it is clear that he was cruel and sadistic. He was also exceptionally cunning and conniving. Because of his unnaturally long life, he was able to plot and plan beyond the scale of what a normal human could do or comprehend. A perfect example of this is when he bided his time in waiting for the right opportunity to break free of his servitude to Galbatorix, even though he professed loyalty to the king openly. He also had significantly more freedom than the king's other servants, in part because the king could not force him to swear loyalty to him in the ancient language by way of using his true name. As Galbatorix was most adept at guessing the true names of those under his service, this suggests that Durza's true name proved too elusive for the king to figure out, or quite possibly it was too complex and long for the king to understand. It is also quite possible that the fact that he was possessed by spirits allowed the Shade the ability to elude having his name guessed. Until Christopher Paolini elaborates on this, if he does at all, we can only theorize on this matter. Durza's cruelty showed itself in his delight in torture and inspiring fear. He relished taunting Arya as he inflicted unspeakable pain onto her and poisoned her again and again, curing her only so that he could continue the next session until she broke under his torture. That he came close to breaking the will of such a strong character such as her also showed just how evil he really was. Durza was also highly ambitious, as he wanted to break free and perhaps even have power over Galbatorix. However, he was very careful not to let these ambitions show unless he felt confident enough to have the advantage, because he knew just how powerful the king was. Whatever loyalty he probably professed was no doubt to serve his purposes until the moment he felt confident enough to turn his back on his former loyalties. Durza was also highly knowledgeable about magic, as he was able to create spells that could pass through the defenses of many skilled magicians. He gloated about this during his torture of Arya. Likewise, the spells he created when mutating Mukmaw into the monster he would eventually grow into were created in such a way that they could withstand the name of names itself. This suggests he was extremely skilled in nonverbal magic, because only nonverbal magic would have such an effect as to be restored despite the name being used. Given his centuries of life, he also was able to teach Galbatorix many verbal spells that allowed him to assert control over others, namely the black dragon Shrukan and the souls of the dragons whose bodies he had killed. Such magic was extremely dangerous and depraved, to say the least. That he taught this to others so that they could exert control over and manipulate innocents just shows how dangerous and sadistic he really was. According to Galbatorix, he considered the Shade a useful tool, but found certain aspects of his abilities were lacking, such as the need for his own self-preservation. Indeed, due to his arrogance, Durza had virtually no fear of death, in part because the only way to kill Shades was to pierce them through the heart. The fact that he also liked to gloat was another weakness, and quite a glaring one at that, as even when he had the advantage, his gloating and monologuing was enough to leave him open to distraction for enemies, such as Aragon, Arya, or Murtagh, to get the drop on him. This in turn helped to lead to Durza's undoing. The fact that Durza's goals were beyond the scope of most other Shades also made him much more dangerous than a normal Shade would be. He may not have been the strongest Shade given the other that would be seen in the inheritance cycle, Varog, but Durza was arguably more deadly than many others, Varog included, as a result. It must therefore be wondered if, as a result of his affiliation with the Duel Dromar, if he shared in the goals that their deity, Aslagor, did. Until more evidence is brought forth to support this, we can only guess. Nevertheless, it must be considered. In regards to his depiction in the 2006 Aragon movie, Durza was portrayed by actor Robert Carlyle. Though the movie itself was considered of poor quality due to the drastic changes in script and character portrayal that left many fans angry, Carlyle's portrayal of the Shade was arguably one of the highlights of the movie, and stuck very true to his description in the book. Durza being portrayed with long red hair, pale skin, and maroon eyes. Interestingly, as the movie progresses, he becomes even more pale and demonic in appearance, especially when it comes to the final battle, making him look deeply unsettling. Likewise, his portrayal by Robert Carlyle also perfectly showcases Durza's arrogant and largely fearless and sadistic personality. Interestingly, though, some differences do occur. For example, in the movies he is responsible for creating the Razak and commanding them in the films, but they are shown to be completely separate creatures outside of his control in the books. The Shade is also able to kill someone just by using his fingernail to stab an Urgal underling in the temple of their head. Likewise, he is able to teleport wherever he wants to in a burst of shadowy mist. Additionally, in the movie, he is able to create his own version of a dragon referred to as a Sundablaka, not to be confused with the magical owl of the same name found within the books. The creature is largely comprised of shadows and smoke, but with steel or iron teeth strong enough to pierce the flesh and scales of a dragon such as Saphira, as well as the armor covering her body. Because the creature is made from dark magic, only direct blows to its head seem to affect it in any way, shape, or form, such as when it bites Saphira and Aragon desperately stabs it in order to make it let go of her. The wounds the beast inflicts also rapidly begin to weaken her over the course of the fight. Likewise, in the film, Durza dies differently than in the books, killed in an aerial battle with Aragon when he jumps from the back of Saphira to stab the Shade in the heart, while she kills the Shadow Dragon when she collides with it and causes it to explode. Durza's demise, while not entirely matching up to how he dies in the books, is still entertaining enough that I personally consider it to be the best part of the movie. Indeed, it is the only part of the movie that I genuinely enjoy watching altogether. But that very well may change when the TV series for Aragon is greenlit and released onto Disney+, whenever that might be. In summary, Durza represents in many ways the equivalent of Allegasia's own version of Darth Vader. He is essentially a servant of a tyrannical king that is just as evil, but perhaps even more ambitious. While he openly professes his loyalties to those he serves, he is not above looking for ways to undercut the authority such a ruler has over him. He is also, as mentioned before, cruel, sadistic, and arrogant. All of these end up contributing to his downfall. Like Darth Vader, Durza also has a tragic backstory that leads to his fall to evil, but unlike the Sith Lord, he has no desire to redeem himself, nor any redeeming qualities. If anything, Durza is to be pitied. The Shade is also comparable to other lackeys that serve higher-ranking tyrannical authorities, such as Starscream from the Transformers franchise. Both serve much more powerful warriors, with Durza serving Galbatorix and Starscream serving Megatron, respectively. Indeed, there are many parallels between Durza and Starscream that cannot be understated. Both are extremely arrogant, clever, ambitious, and prone to gloating. However, Durza himself is clearly less cowardly than Starscream, as shown through his own lack of self-preservation. Durza himself can also be compared to such characters as Comte de Rochefort in the Three Musketeers films and BBC series, an arrogant, ambitious swordsman who serves the nefarious and corrupt Cardinal Richelieu. Both have a habit of going beyond their orders to achieve goals outside their leaders' scopes in the hopes of fulfilling personal vendettas. Likewise, Durza also has some similarity to Darth Plagueis from Star Wars in the fact that he is responsible for teaching dark magic of the worst kind to the main antagonist, the antagonist of course being Galbatorix. In all, Durza also represents a nefarious underling to the main antagonist of the inheritance cycle, one that carries out his own ambitions and schemes, some of them behind the scenes as a means of achieving greater power, serving his liege lord only long enough to achieve enough power to stab his superior in the back once he finds his weakness. He also causes destruction and chaos wherever he goes, leaving behind a nasty legacy that leaves various protagonists to pick up the pieces and sweep them under the rug, or dispose of them altogether. Arguably, he causes more damage in what he teaches the main antagonist and is ultimately responsible for how much of the destruction that follows. The death of such a character therefore stands as a great relief to all those who end up encountering them. And so we come to an end of our analysis of the character of Durza. For all of you who have tuned in to watch, I genuinely hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to leave a like, comment, and be sure to subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. Every bit of attention these videos are given helps the channel grow and spread so that others who share your interests can view them as well. And be sure to stay tuned for more, for we will be covering a wide array of other science fiction and fantasy novels, films, and television series on this channel as we make it grow. Until then, I'd like to say thank you all for watching. It is always appreciated.